I mean, and just Charlie, I mean, and Vaughn talks about, Trump's public promise to, I guess, deconstruct the administrative state. This is something that President Trump has been, acting on day one. I'm just wondering, what are the legal, in other words, does the executive have the right to do that?
I don't believe it does. And not to quibble about details, but the government is not funded through the end of September for these buyouts. Congress has to fund the government. Democratic votes will be needed to fund the government. So how are they going to pay for these buyouts? That's a question that has not been answered. The president cannot expend those funds. As I read the law, and as having served on the Appropriations Committee for many years, the president also, nor Elon Musk, have the authority to shut down an independent agency of the government or move it over to the State Department, that being the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. So there are a lot of things happening right now that are just beyond crazy. I mean, and by the way, one arm of the government is not talking, one hand is not talking to the other. Just last night, the president proposed the United States taking an ownership position in Gaza. Well, you're going to need a very big and robust USAID. It's never going to happen, but you're going to need a USAID to deal with all the issues that Jordan and Egypt will face if you were to move these Palestinians. Again, it's not going to happen. But, I mean, there just seems to be a complete and utter incoherence as well as incompetence. But in the meantime, though, they're doing enormous damage to the entire federal enterprise, whether it's at the FBI purge or the shuttering of USAID, or the trade war with Canada and Mexico. I mean, it's just beyond anything I have ever seen. And at some point, Congress is going to have to reassert itself in this debate. They cannot be bystanders as we are, witnessing the dismantling of the federal government.
Hey, Charlie, and what are your thoughts, because you have the appropriations experience and others, what Secretary of State Rubio and others have said is that USAID has simply been an impossible place to get any accountability. And there have been some reports as to where some of the money, it may be a small percentage of the entire budget, but it is millions of dollars going to things that maybe could be changed. I'm just wondering, what is the accountability or lack of it in USAID from your perspective?
Well, Congress has to exercise oversight, not just over USAID, but every other program it funds. It's a $40 billion program. They've identified a few $1 million in questionable funding. Well, fine. But, why don't we look? We can look at a lot of government agencies. The Pentagon has an $800 billion budget. You don't think we could find some things there, but we're not going to shut the Pentagon down because of some misspent funds. We should clean it up. We should clean it out wherever there are problems. But USAID provides a lot of support on a humanitarian basis for people who are starving, people who are dying of AIDS, and we're providing essential health services. And by the way, much of USAID funding right now is going into Ukraine to help with the issues, the non-military issues that they're dealing with in agriculture and other areas. So just to say that the USAID should be shut down because of some questionable expenditures while other essential work is going on, I think is really just utterly reckless.
Yeah, I mean, Stephanie, the USAID website is now back up again with just this notice to employees. It says by the end of Friday, all USAID direct hire personnel will be placed on paid leave around the globe, with a few exceptions. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that there are actually a couple of inflection points for Congress to assert itself, and that will be with this government funding conversation that's happening in March. And it's not just about how this administration is spending money with USAID, but also across the federal government. And I think there will be court cases, but in the court of public opinion, the impact of these cuts and these actions have to impact a larger group of Americans before you can get Americans animated about this. And so I expect that when the farmers in Iowa and Texas don't receive the purchases from USAID for the products that they send overseas, I expect that if there's some sort of intelligence failure or domestic terrorist attack, that will underscore the importance of the FBI and of the CIA and of the federal workers who work on a daily basis to keep us safe and who contribute an awful lot. And it's only when they're not there tending to their jobs and people don't receive their Social Security checks and otherwise that people really start to understand the importance of these workers, as opposed to easily maligning them as the current administration has as a bunch of bureaucrats. They do serve a purpose, and they serve the American people.